It's hard. Like, I mean, let's just be very honest with anybody listening and watching. Like, it's not an easy thing at times.
Hi, I'm Russ, and this is the Memory Makers Podcast, the show that helps you create amazing customer experiences and make more memories. And we are joined today by none other than Mr. Armando Launti. How are you, my brother?
I'm doing phenomenal, twin.
Yes, I know. Thank you for wearing the official Memory Makers uniform, black T-shirt, and jeans.
I threw on the white hat once I saw that we were going to be identical. We had to have a little difference wearing the glasses today just to throw it off.
100%. When people talk about groupthink, I don't always, I realize like you and I have pretty much an identical wardrobe where we're just like, okay, we can just wear the same thing every day. And then Danny and I have realized are getting closer and closer to the same haircut. So between the two of you, I am like this hybrid.
You're a nice little in between. I like that. You get the best of both worlds.
It's Danny's outdoing me on his tattoos and stuff too.
He is.
So
Look, I need to start getting suggestions. I need some suggestions from you guys.
My only thing that I tell folks is put it on a picture on a place that you'll see it every day and have it up there for at least 6 months. And as long as you don't get sick of looking at it and you like it and everything, then you're ready to pull the trigger.
Okay.
On it. So
I like that advice. I like that advice.
I love it. So the last time that we had you on, and it's been too long and that's on me.
It's okay.
The main topic that we focused on was having this vivid vision for the direction of your business and how do you look out into the future and what, intentional creative thought process do you need to plan and extrapolate out for. And so for today's episode, I wanted to talk about a little bit more of just boots on the ground, either day to day or week to week look in the life of being a business owner and a leader, because those are not the same things, and balancing that within the family because you have 3 boys and your wife and all of that. And we were talking literally yesterday of just sometimes that is a juggle and your, work-life balance is a bunch of fakakta nonsense.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that term. Because it's one of those pieces where a lot of times that gets thrown out as a I've got to achieve this magical balance. But balance, by the definition typically that people apply to it, means that things are equal. Right. And just like everything else in life, there are times where you're going to have to go harder, times where you need to take the foot off the gas a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that can also be different in various parts of your life at any given time, whether it be your home life, your personal, taking care of self, and or your work life. Yeah. And so I really prefer the term synergy. Because, or flow, like whatever other fun, narrative you want to give to it. But
insert buzzword here.
Exactly. Insert the appropriate buzzword, but balance is the one that I would avoid because it's an almost impossible piece to achieve. Yeah. And it's not practical, from a reality standpoint either. And so
it almost sets you up to feel like if you have that picture and that word in your head and then you don't hit that impossible metric, then you just get disenfranchised a bit with it too. So let's start with a little bit of some day-to-day aspects of your job and your role where you are a professional whack-a-moler. In some instances, because you've got every department head reporting to you, but you also have an open door policy for anybody in the company. Mm-hmm. And when you're in between, that 80 to 100, level of staff members, and your day can become not yours very quick if you don't have some tools and some strategies and some ways to kind of manage and handle that. So what are initially, and because we've been on this anti-meeting crusade of what do we need to have a meeting, or is this a conversation that we can have quickly? Yep. When we're showing up to a meeting, are we prepared prior to the meeting and we're actually discussing the talking points instead of just reviewing the agenda and kind of doing it on the fly? We still have some times where we hit that mark, where we don't hit that mark. It's a constant vigilance that you have to have with it. So when you're looking at structuring out your time, how do you ensure that you are not getting overburdened with, micromanagement and being on every single meeting and doing all of that? Like, what are some of the things that you feel like you've had to put in place from a personnel standpoint, as well as expectations and kind of stewarding your time?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different strategies that people can do. I think the first is look at your own calendar and don't be afraid to put blocks of time on there for things that you just need to get done, right? because when you do have an open door policy or an open calendar policy, so to speak, you never know when somebody's going to need something. And if they see that time is available, they're going to want to grab it if something comes up. And so I think the first thing to do is, hey, if I need to work on this big project, or I need some heads down time, or whatever the case may be, block it out on your own calendar, just like you would, an actual meeting or anything along those lines. I think the other piece is that before people are allowed to book something on your calendar and set the time for that conversation, whether it be the date and time that it happens, the amount of time that it happens, is that you ask them to reach out to you first. I'm like, hey, I want to talk to you about X, Y, Z. And you, like, how much time is this going to take? What are the problems that you're going to solve? Can it be solved right now in a quick exchange, whether it be in person or on a text, hangout, Teams, whatever that somebody might be utilizing? Can I solve it right now in the moment? Because one of the other things that I've taken to heart, going all the way back to some teachings from Jeff, is like, how can I try and only touch this once? Right? So if somebody has had to come to me and then ask if they can talk about something, and then schedule something to talk about it, and then we've had to research about it, and then we have the meeting about it, like, we've now potentially touched that item
4 or 5 times.
4 or 5 times, each of us, right? Versus, I'm okay with ad hoc, right? Like, sometimes people can't shift for that, and I think that's one of the pieces that I'm very good at, is the ability to shift gears very quickly. Like, I can go from meetings about finance or procurement to sales and marketing to HR related items and client, meetings back to back to back, and not skip a beat. And so because of at least that being something that I'm able to do, I allow that open door policy to kind of follow that same process, where it's like, hey, let's come talk. Let's just handle it now. That way it's also not creating an artificial barrier of time for you to be able to achieve whatever you needed my guidance on.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And it also avoids that piece of, like, if we're going to set a 45-minute meeting, like, it was most likely going to take that 45 minutes, whether it needs to or not. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do also Pavlovian is, okay, let's see if we can get it done in a little bit shorter time.
It's almost, we make it a little competition. Like, hey, can we knock this out a little bit quicker?
Yeah.
Like, can we bang this out? And when we do, we just, hey, don't be afraid at the awkward silence at the end of the meeting. Go, great, we covered everything we need to cover. Perfect. Let's all get some time back in our day to go knock out some other things. Versus sometimes if you don't have that mentality, as soon as you get to that point, you then want to just start adding things and fill that time with whatever happens to pop into your mind. And there are times where that can still solve good problems. Don't get me wrong. But oftentimes it becomes like you're almost fishing for things to fill the time. Like even a regularly scheduled meeting like we have with our core leaders, it's, we used to do it weekly. We switched it to be a little bit longer of a meeting, but bi-weekly. We're very quick to go, hey, we're only an hour into this and we've knocked out the things that we need to knock out. Let's get our time back, right? Versus just trying to arbitrarily fill that time. And I know myself as a leader who leads, that meeting, for example, I had to fight internally the idea that I need to find topics to fill this time. I don't. If are there days where it's a 3-hour meeting? Yes. Are there days where it can be done in 45 minutes? Also, yes. Both answers are okay. Yeah. And being fine with both answers being okay, I think, is super important.
And I think one thing in that, just as far as like meeting etiquette that has worked for us, at least as a team, is also designating, hey, if I've got something on the agenda to talk about, is it an info share or is it a deep dive discussion kind of piece? Because, for the most part, they can all read that. Hey, if they have questions, great, we can pop that in there. Yeah. But we don't need to go through a full pomp and circumstance and a full dog and pony show for something that takes everybody 25 seconds to read through, if it's, something along those lines.
And I think even another piece on the calendar component as well is, depending on what calendar system that you use, like we use Google and whatnot, you can set default lengths of time for meetings to be there. And in most cases, people automatically set default times for, like, I'm going to schedule a meeting on the hour and it's going to last a half an hour or an hour.
Right.
Like, there's not often anything in between. So I think two little small tricks that I try and do is, one, I set my defaults to be 20 minutes and 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And it sounds silly, but it also ensures that there's small gaps when I do end up in days where I got to go meeting to meeting to meeting, and sometimes they still run over. But something as simple as like, I need to go get another drink. Yeah. I need to use the restroom. I need to just breathe for a moment, whatever the case may be.
Or take a look at something prior to the next meeting.
Correct. I want to try and reset or just, do a quick review. It gives you those micro breaks, to be able to transition a little bit.
I love it.
Smoother.
One of the things that kind of shifting gears slightly here is handling hard situations. This comes up, there's internal stuff, there's external stuff that's just human beings are involved, so it's going to have shenanigans that come our way.
Facts.
First off, how do you try to keep your finger on the pulse of not just the people that report regularly to you, but throughout the entire team, because you have that onus and that responsibility to make sure that you're creating the environment that you envision, and that what is getting kind of directed downstream is actually manifesting with that. So what are some of the things that you have in place to do that regularly?
I think there's a couple different components to that equation, and I think it shifts a little bit on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis on which one is getting the most priority. But some of the more regular things is, first of all, we do a weekly survey for our entire company, where we give out, 6 to 8 questions asking like, how is your stress level? What are things that are going on? Good wins, opportunities for improvement, anything else you'd like me to know, et cetera. And that gets utilized at various degrees by our different team members, right? Mm-hmm. There are some team members that's not their form of communication. And you get very basic answers.
Clipped, yes, no.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's others that, provide you a diary, and there's in between.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I do there is that, I make sure that myself and Amy and Kim, from an ownership standpoint, we read every single response every single week.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't necessarily mean that we're acting on every single item. Sometimes it's just the information share, so to speak. But it gives us a pulse on how are different team members doing. Is somebody who doesn't normally put something on there all of a sudden provided a larger response?
Out of the norm.
That's out of the norm, so you can see trends. It allows you to go get additional context if needed. It's just one of those components that we utilize on a weekly basis that kind of gives us a breadth of information. I think the other areas that we do is I have one-on-ones with each of the leads of our different, core team members. So, such as yourself or Danny or Zach, Katie and others, where it's like, hey, I'm checking on you to then get your input on how are things going with you? How are things going with your team? What are the problems, solutions, et cetera, that we need to work through that are blocking ways within your team? For whatever your respective disciplines are. And then this last one is sometimes overlooked because, again, leaders, I feel like sometimes feel like they always just have to be doing things and need to be at their computer, or sometimes they hide away in their office. Management by walking around. It sounds silly, but it's like, go, in our case, go walk the shop floor, right? Yeah. Go talk to the people. And sometimes you're just saying hi.
Right.
Asking questions that have nothing to do with work.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, how's life?
Yeah.
How's your wife? How's your kids? How's your husband? How's your hobbies? Whatever the case may be, talk with people whenever you can. And it builds a level of rapport, and it gives them opportunities to sometimes bring things up.
Yeah.
Right. And you ask for input, but it doesn't always even have to be work related. It helps give an opportunity. It helps keep a pulse on things. I think those are some of the components. And then, like you said at the beginning, like I have a pretty open door policy where pretty much anybody from, a brand new hire, somebody out on the shop floor, to people on the leadership team can literally walk in my office pretty much anytime, as long as I'm not on a meeting or meeting with somebody else,
right? And
say, hey, can I talk to you for a second?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's about personal stuff. Sometimes it's about work stuff. whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So that obviously can help you also get an idea of, hey, is this person going through something abnormal? How can we show up for them, even if it's in the personal life, because we want them to have those ducks in a row so that way they can show up to their best while they're here and also feel like they can be, trust us as leaders to, express these things or confide in these things.
Well, and it's one of those components where, look, everybody has a life that's incredibly complex, right? They have significant others at home, kids at home, parents, grandparents, cousins, whatever, family stuff that can have just, again, an infinitely complex set of circumstances that they're having to juggle. And that baggage doesn't just get left at the door. Right. It's something that's weighing on them. And so making sure that you are having empathy for something that they may be going through, but you can only do that if you've created a relationship where they're willing to share that,
right?
Or that there's avenues that they're willing to share that. It's the only way that you can have that understanding. I'll pick on you. Like, is Russ struggling today because he had to deal with stuff at the house, or right. Is Russ struggling today because he's got a headache? Like, what is the case may be?
Sure.
Like, how do I find those things out? How do we have an open dialogue about those right. kind of things? And I think it's really easy today in today's society to just write off somebody and say, oh, you made a mistake, you're done, and not understand the context or not give a second chance.
Right.
I've also been the victim of giving too many second chances, and that can sometimes be a burden that you have to bear, but I will always lead with that extra opportunity. It's noted that my hat says today, humankind, right?
Yeah. Be both.
Right. And that is something that people need to do, right? We are one species on this planet, regardless of your background, race, religion, sex, all those things. We're all humans. How can we be kind to each other?
Yeah.
And if we can lead with that, then I think we're just in a better place as a company, as a society, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, and there are still things that are going to raise their head, right? We talked about with the human beings being in there. And so and some of that, like we talked about, is internal, where, okay, gosh, we've given this second chance, we've coached this up, we're not getting the traction where we need to be, end up, letting a team member go and allowing them to be successful elsewhere. But then there can be repercussions or backlash and hurt feelings and all of that may not be stemmed in the reality of that situation, but then you're still having to go through and handle some of that. So when those things pop up, I mean, how do you, one, keep an open mind to an extent of, okay, well, yes, how much of this is because, they're going now through a life transition and they're angry and upset, which are natural feelings to have, but also not let that curtail how you want to show up for folks that are still on the team and not get jaded with some of that.
It's hard. I mean, let's just be very honest with anybody listening and watching. Like, it's not an easy thing at times because I am known to give more chances than probably I should at times, but I have to balance that to making sure that I'm holding team members accountable and that I'm holding to the standard that our clients expect output to be for our products and our services. And I have to make sure that, like, hey, if we have a new team member, let's say, that we brought on, and they're trying to understand the workplace, the culture, the expectations, the standards, and they see that somebody's not, one of these things is not like the other, and somebody's not doing what they should be doing. If we're not making corrective changes to that, whether that be, providing opportunities for improvement or providing opportunities to be successful elsewhere, then we risk that new team member, building bad habits or looking at things inappropriately from what our expectations should be because they view something as acceptable. I think sometimes one of the hard things is like, because we try and handle things on an individual basis, and understand that people have a depth to the complexity of what might be going on.
Right.
It's not like we blast out that, like, hey, we had a conversation with so-and-so, we made this corrective action. It's not like we blast that out to 80 team members.
Right.
Nor should we.
Right.
But then sometimes, when that corrective action does mean that somebody has joined, let's say, the alumni path, then there's questions that you also have to answer internally of, well, I didn't know that person was having issues or not. And oftentimes the people within the immediate vicinity of that team member know, right? That are on that team because they've seen it and they understand and they get it. It's normally that group of team members that are like 1 to 2 degrees of separation away.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're in a different department, a different part of the building, and they may have the social interactions because we do a lot of social events for our team members, et cetera. And they didn't know that there was shortcomings that were taking place.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And so, that's one of those other pieces that you have to balance. As far as like, how do I try and keep positive? I just have to move on. Like, and it sounds bad. And you have to understand that, like you mentioned, that sometimes people, their defense mechanism is not always to have things grounded in reality. Yeah. And as long as you can go to bed every night knowing that you've given this person an opportunity, that you've given a chance for correction, then that's all you can do. And you have to be able to move on. And for every team member where maybe something didn't work out and you have to question if you should have given them the chances that you did, there's another team member that you gave that chance to work through whatever was happening in their life or, at workplace, that has now become a stalwart within the team.
Well, and that's how you have to look at it. Responsibility, I think, as well. And we've had conversations on this where it's not just that one employee. It's the 82 employees that we have, plus their families. And if we're allowing things to not be up to the standard, it jeopardizes and can, especially if it goes unchecked, like it can jeopardize many more than just one person.
Yes, 100%.
When we are looking for, let's say, outside factors that impact the industry and our business.
There's none of those going on right now.
Tariffs are totally fine right now, and there, or COVID, no big deal, all of that. How, when we're dealing with that, one, I've always seen you have a very solid exterior network outside of Creative Works to be able to, one, not make decisions in a vacuum, but also have some peers that are not necessarily in the Creative Works company that you can rely on, pick their brains, see all that. How do you focus on building that network? What are some of the activities or habits that you have in place to make sure that you've got that really solid exterior network to be able to rely on?
Yeah, I think, I'm a big fan of masterminds and or networking groups. I'm in one that is here with local business owners within the Indianapolis, market. And, there's software developers, there's real estate developers, there's other manufacturers. There's always a charity, nonprofit that's part of each group. And so like for this group, it's one that we meet on a monthly basis and we take a half a day and we are going through like, what are the things that we're working through challenges wise? Because although each of us has a unique business, there are also constants and throughputs that this person may have already experienced in some form that can share their insight, their experience, their knowledge with me, and vice versa. I think that has been massive for my outcome of finding people that are completely outside of our normal bubble.
Sure.
Right. With different perspectives. And I highly, highly recommend that. And then I've also done groups with people within our bubble.
Right.
Right. Whether it be during different times where we literally ran one for 2 years, during COVID with industry team members. And then there's plenty of others where it's like those relationships and being comfortable just picking up the phone too, not even just waiting until, I can't bring this up until my next scheduled meeting that's in a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever.
Right.
No, just you've created a relationship. Hey, can I talk to you? Or, hey, let me send out a message. Can I talk to the 2 or 3 of you that you maybe feel have some experience to share?
Yeah.
I think that's hugely, hugely valuable.
Yeah. I think it also helps where that dirty little secret that should not be dirty or little is we all have different levels of tenure when it comes to being in a role like that, but they're just different problem solving. You may have strengths or weaknesses that you need a little yin to your yang to be able to get some of that going. and not being afraid or feeling like you have to bunker in and batten down the hatches, so to speak. It should be much more of a, okay, put that on your chest and lean forward with it. Let's seek some of that outside guidance.
There are some problems that, yes, you just have to handle, right? Or some situations that you've got to navigate. And there are others where you need to be comfortable going and asking for help or asking for advice and guidance.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to get that guidance and that advice, and it's going to be based on what their experience was. And there might be nuance or context that's unique to your situation, but it can help influence the direction or give you different outcomes that maybe you hadn't considered to try and work through. I think that's hugely important. And I think one of the other pieces that you have to do is you've got to be willing to take in new information and change, right? It is so easy, human race wise, so to speak, that once you have a belief, that changing that belief can sometimes be impossible. And your willingness and ability to take in new information and change your mind based on new outcomes is hugely important to your future and your success. As a human, as a business owner, as a parent, as a spouse, whatever the case may be, you've got to be willing to change. As like it was a somewhat comedy, movie that was out a long time ago. I think Dogma was the name of it. Chris Rock had a great statement in there, and it was specifically about that, right? His line was, belief is so hard to change because once you believe in something, it can become part of your identity. Once it's part of your identity, it's a much harder thing to ever change. And I think that is a huge component to being a leader, is that you've got to be willing to change. And you've got to be willing to take this new information in and plot a new course. And I look to, times like COVID. I look to times like what we've had to deal with, with tariffs here recently. We've got almost like this joke of like, hey, this is the decision or the outcome based on it being, May 29th at 3:02 p.m. Like, we jokingly get that serious because we know that certain elements of information may change in the next 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 months. And so by almost being catty, for lack of a better term, about it, out in front of it, you take away the power of, but you told me yesterday this. Yes, well, yesterday at that time, this is what we knew. And based on the information that we knew, this was the direction and the right path. We now got this new piece of information. Right? And they always say hindsight is 20/20. Well, that's more pertinent if you're like, oh, well, if I would have known, great. Well, you did possibly know and you were unwilling to change. Right. So like, how do you reconcile that? So you've got to be willing to make those adjustments in your life.
Absolutely. All right, let's shift gears for the last little bit of this and talk a little bit about finding fulfillment outside of work and more so, you have 3 boys. They are all at one and very close in age range. And so they all have different sporting activities and extracurriculars and all of the things. You're also a husband, and you need to be able to have some time for you and Amy to be able to connect as a couple outside of work and outside of the boys. What are some of the things that you regularly try to do and in order to show up for them and be a presence in them and a shaping future instead of just being like in the background for some of that?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to where we started with the idea of balance versus synergy. Right? Is the first thing you've got to do to be able to take care of anybody else is you got to take care of yourself. So what are the things that you need to do for yourself to keep your fulfillment, to keep your happiness, to keep your sanity at times? And that's different for every person, right? So for me, I wake up earlier than Amy and the boys every day because that's an opportunity where I get time by myself, right? Like there's not a work distraction yet at 5 a.m. or 5:30 in the morning, I can spend some time, working out, just reflecting, whatever the case may be. I try and make sure that I'm not picking up my phone and opening up my email during that time, or even social media during that time. If I'm opening it up, it's because I'm trying to start an audiobook or a podcast or something along those lines for extra learning, or entertainment, sure. Right? We've been jokingly, going down the Sanderson rabbit hole and Mistborn series,
Yeah.
And that's been a great relief for me in just having that entertainment fiction, right? Because that's one of the other things, right? You'll have a lot of people go, well, you got to be reading all these books and listening to these podcasts and these things. And it almost becomes its own job in and of itself.
Yeah.
But you also need to find ways to release for yourself. And so not every moment that you would be on a treadmill exercising or driving or commuting in the car needs to be to the education and improvement. Some of it can be and should be, but some of it needs to just be like, I need to decompress.
Yeah.
And that becomes that extra part of it is, okay, so, hey, I get to work, or here, let me actually back up. So I start my day, I do that personal time. Then the kids start getting up, depending on school year versus summer, between 6 and 6:30, getting them ready to go for whatever the activities might be for the day. Right. Breakfast, changing, preparedness, whatever the case may be. Drop them off for school. Come to drive into the shop. Here throughout the day, but then you have that transition home, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got 3 boys. They're active, like you said. It's right now we're in baseball, gymnastics, and flag football, plus 2 in band. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to understand, okay, which of those things are Amy and I dividing and conquering because of,
pure
meetings, logistics, whatever the case may be. What time do I need to leave the office to be able to be home in time for that? So sometimes that means I'm going to then need to work after they go to bed in the evening to knock out some stuff, or I'm going to have to answer some messages, during those times. But I try, and once I'm engaged and I'm at, the baseball diamond or at gymnastics or whatever the case may be, like I'm present. I try and stay present. Not perfect at it. Yeah. Like I'll be the first person to admit that sometimes there's only so many times that your phone can vibrate in your pocket before you need to go, wait, is the building burning down?
Happening? Yeah.
Or is this something I need to handle now or later, right? So you kind of triage and put it into buckets on what you need to respond to or not. But then you re-engage, in those moments. And you try and find that balance. Or not that balance, but that synergy of like, hey, like I've had to leave a little bit early so I can make it because I'm coaching the baseball team for 2 of my boys, because they got to be on the same team together based on how they mix the grade levels this year, and they're so close in age.
Yeah.
And that's important to me to have that time and that opportunity with them.
And not just being present at the games, but you also say, I do want to coach, or I do want to have some of that stewardship beyond just the activity happening itself. Was just something that you said, this is going to be really important for me, because it also, yes, it's an extra level of responsibility, but it also puts me in a position where I know, like, I have to have a certain level of commitment to that to be able to fully engage with it. And you're also a sports junkie too.
I'm a sports junkie, and we've all got a different history and a different path.
Yeah.
My parents were split at a young age.
Yeah.
My mom was doing a lot of working. My dad was not around. And so I didn't have that. Right. And so part of that is what we all do is we try and be the parent that we didn't have. Right. Whatever that shortcoming may be that we perceive from our, and everybody's situation is different. So it's like, I want to be present for my kids. I want to be able to help them through their, sports, through whatever life situations they're dealing with. And be there as part of it, as well as I am, like you said, a sports junkie. I do have at least basic fundamental knowledge at this grade level, to be able to contribute and help them grow. And so I want to be a part of those things. And then even something that I just recently posted about on social media, if you've got multiple kids and you've got your wife, and it's important to have one-on-one time though too, because it's very easy to go, hey, we're now all together going to Eli and Logan's game, and then after that we're going to Gavin's game, and then we're going to XYZ, whatever the case may be. how do I create one-on-one time opportunities for each of them? And so what we started doing a couple of years ago is that our school system does what they call a late start. Like every other week, they start an hour later than they normally would it's like their version of a teacher prep day. Gotcha. Instead of just giving a whole day off every so often, they just do this late start to give everybody an extra hour every 2 weeks. And so what we did is we turned that into, great, well, every other Wednesday, Amy or I is taking one of the boys out and doing a one-on-one breakfast with them, right? And they look forward to it. They like that. And that's a way to give that intentional time to them. Again, and it's just, I know that on that day from my work schedule, I'm not going to be in until a little bit later because I've allocated that time out. And then the flip side is then you got to try and find ways to schedule that, time with your spouse, or your significant other and your partner, so in looking at what's important to them. So Amy, for example, is very big on shows, Broadway, musicals, etc. So every year we get the Broadway schedule for Indianapolis. We try and get tickets for that. We make that scheduled date nights. We're not perfect at it, but we try and do our own one-on-one date night every 2 to 3 weeks that we try and get on the calendar, schedule it out. Different seasons, different times a year, that can be a little bit easier or harder depending, again, on whatever sports activities and life is happening. Is it trade show season on the work side or whatever the case may be? But it's just be intentional about it. Yeah. If you prioritize it, you'll make it happen.
It's interesting because with Rinker being 4, he's starting to get into these different pieces. And so my game plan now is, okay, let's just get him exposed to different stuff and see what he kind of naturally leans towards, but with the higher purpose of, okay, I'd eventually like you to have a sport or two, some sort of musical instrument, and just because I think that those are important from a physical and a mental just development, exposing them to new things. Have you done that with the boys as well of, okay, like, let's just go and check out some different things? Like Zach Tatro, his daughter, who's Rinker's age, just started jujitsu, which I'm like, that's awesome. I didn't even know 4-year-olds could do jujitsu. So are there things, and now they're old enough where they're looking on things online and they may naturally discover it. They've gotten into gaming. You're also, a bit of a
small
gamer
nerd.
And have some following on
6 followers away from 1,000.
Let's go.
While being, a Twitch streamer. Yes, it's hilarious.
I love it.
I love it. It's so fun.
But that's translated to them. You guys can talk about game theory. Like you can create. And Scott Harvey talks about this, as in from parenting, that quantity time is what will actually make the quality time. Yeah. Because you can't just have some big, like, hey, we're going to Disney and this is the 72
one time
hours a year that you're going to get me, unfiltered and everything. So, is that something that you guys are all, hey, we've got a busy calendar, but we also want to try and experiment with new things and kind of infuse
it is. And it changes probably season to season and boy to boy or family to family. But so like for us, sometimes it's like randomly, as pickleball has gotten a little bit hyped, we've gone and done that a couple times. Eli, our oldest, is gotten, into middle school. He's wanting to do, trying out for football and wrestling at a more competitive level. So he's wanting to work out more. And so, every Sunday we're going with one of our other coworkers, Nick, and we're going to a community center and he's getting that time. And then ironically, then the younger 2 boys and Amy typically show up a little bit later. And then we all play basketball together, right? It's just finding those different things where they have that interest. We're obviously all gamers and that goes in seasons with them too. Like sometimes, they're more into first-person shooter games. Sometimes they're more into Minecraft. Sometimes they're wanting to play Mario Party, and sometimes they're wanting to jump into Diablo with me, or whatever the case may be. And that again can vary from each of the boys. But those are times and shared components. And an overlooked piece of that puzzle that sometimes happens is with your partner is when that partner can have that time with the children. From whatever that may be, that also means that other partner has time for themselves. Yes. Right? Huge. And is looking at that flip side of it is if Amy is doing an activity with, the boys, and that gives me time to have my own, recuperation of whatever, or my own, quality time. If I'm doing stuff with the boys, that gives her that time. Yeah. And look, you want to be productive. And I know that everybody's always like, hey, you got to always be doing something for yourself 24 hours a day, every waking moment. Like sometimes it's okay to just sit on the couch.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes it's okay to listen, like I said, to the fantasy novel.
Yeah.
As opposed to the podcast.
Right.
It's okay to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of I was so excited. I came into your office. It was 2 weeks ago. We were coming up on Mother's Day, and I'm like, I am getting Tiff like a solo date night for just her, where it was like booked a massage, booked a hotel, so that way she could just go watch some TV, have a little pampering,
not have responsibilities.
Just have our beautiful koala baby just on her all the time, to be able to do some of that, because there are times where it's like, hey, our anniversary's coming up. We're going to go and do a Thomas Rhett concert. And we're going to go and do dinner. We're going to split that up on a couple of nights. But there are still times where she, as an individual human being, just needs some time for her and what she's comfortable
100%.
with. So, that was a big portion of creating some runway for your spouse to be able to fly. Yeah. I love it, man. I think we could go on for a lot longer. I'm going to wrap us up here, though, and we'll have to continue on some more breaking down of the game film.
You're going to invite me back?
Yes, man.
Okay, I like it. I made the cut, guys. I made the cut.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. With that, we're going to wrap up here, but we've got more awesome content coming your guys' way through the weekly episodes, so be sure to come back and check us out when those drop. If you like what you heard today, we always appreciate the 5-star reviews. Please and thank you if we've earned it. And if
we have,
I hope we're coming up on 100 episodes here before too long. Danny and I are already starting to have to figure out
that centennial.
What's a cool thing? I really want to do a Martin Short, like Jiminy Glick style interview or something like that, where I just ask him ridiculous questions and roast him essentially. And I haven't expressed that with him, and if he listens to this episode, I'll deny it. But yeah, so we'll get there with it. But thank you all for joining us. Big shout out to Mikey Mike on the 1s and 2s working the Ultranet for us, and we will catch you on the next one, Troublemakers.